Guys, thanks so much for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. Keep those questions and suggestions coming. I get to them as soon as I possibly can. One of the suggestions that I got was to compare the before and after versions of the Brit 800 and the EVH 5150 models, which were all updated in firmware 1.2.56. So that's what today's video is all about. I won't be using third-party IRs, nor will I be using an amp head or another modeler. I don't even own an amp head anymore. My wife is designing a new room for me to do video shots in, and I told her that if she wanted me to be like all the other cool creators, I needed to have a rack with a bunch of amp heads behind me. She said, okay, how much does that cost? I said, well, I'd probably need a good 20 amp heads, so we're looking at, $50,000 to $100,000. She just laughed at me. So no rack of amp heads. On the other hand, she did okay a purchase of 2 new Telecasters, so it's all good. What I'm going to do is record some clips using the Brit 800 and the EVH 5150s using firmware 1.1.111, and then I'll also record some clips using the same amp models in firmware 1.2.56. Then we'll compare them and see if we can hear any differences. Now, in the interest of total transparency, I want to let you know that I am comparing old amp rigs to new amp rigs. I'm not making sure that the amp heads are all connected to the same cab using the same mic in the same position and all that. What I'm doing is using the factory version of those 4 amps in firmware 1.1.111, and then I'm using the factory versions that are found in firmware 1.2.56. So this is not a scientific test by any stretch of the imagination. It's just testing old rigs against new rigs. Fender not only updated the amp heads, they changed some of the cab settings as well. So I think that it's important to compare old factory rig to new factory rig. I changed nothing but amp settings, and we'll get to that in a minute. Here's the plan, guys. I've backed up my 1.2.56 system and presets, and I reloaded firmware 1.1.111. While that was going on, I installed my prior copy of the Pro Control app. When firmware 1.1.111 was successfully loaded onto my system, I restored my old system and presets. Then I created 4 barebone presets that have amp and cab only: Brit 800, EVH Green, EVH Blue, and EVH Red. I'll record a few riffs for each amp using different settings. First, I'll play a riff at the default setting. Then I'll do a riff with everything at noon. And for the last one, I'll max out the gain in the master. Now that should be interesting. I'll also record a dry track at the same time, which I'll use for reamping with the updated firmware 1.2.56 system and presets. I'll reload firmware 1.2.56 and my system setting and presets. Then I'll reamp the track using the updated amps. After that's all done, I'll put them back to back so we can compare them. Alrighty then, here we go. So what do you think, guys? Big differences, right? I mean, I have never owned a real JMP 800 or a 5150, so I have no idea if they're closer to the real amps or not. So if any of you guys have them and do know that information, let me know. Thing of it is, I do like what I'm hearing, and they are fun to play. Those old amps sounded like they had a blanket over them. No charts, graphs, or third-party IRs were used in the making of this video, guys. I'm old school. Back in the day, we would have brought the old amp and the new amp down into the basement or up in the garage, whatever you had access to, and played going back and forth until the parents came down and kicked us out. Ask me how I know this. Anyway, that's how this test went, just with no parents. Yay! So it's up to you to decide if this kind of testing is okay in today's world or not. Drop me a line and let me know if you think my testing is valid or flawed. I'll have all new content from the new firmware this Friday. You don't want to miss that. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. All right, guys, have a great week, and I will be talking with you again on Friday.